everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Crucible Cast. I'm Mercedes, and as always, I am joined by Brad and Alex.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about vault tours today.
Yeah,
yes. So, we recently
it's a family show.
we recently had a couple of events. One of them being the first one in Eindhoven, and the second one being in Seattle. Both of them happened on the same weekend. Let's see, our Eindhoven event was Archon.
It was, yeah, Archon Solo.
Yep. Archon Solo, and then why don't you tell us a little bit about that, because some interesting stuff happened there.
Yeah, so I was at that one. Anyone who's there and I spoke to, hi guys, shout out to everyone I spoke to. I had an absolute blast. We had 186 players, I think, there, and yeah, over 3 days, we split the day 1 and 2 because there were some other events going on. So we had a Friday day 1, a Saturday day 1, both filtering into day 2 on the Sunday. And yeah, everyone had a blast. It was great. It was really good. Yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of stats. We're just going to go through some of the basic stuff on here. So one of the key things that I was curious about, and I know you were as well, Brad, is what the representation of houses would be on day 1 versus what we saw on day 2.
Especially considering that it's an Archon format, so players are choosing from their collections what deck they're bringing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people have a few decks, some people have hundreds of decks. They're picking the deck that they think is best suited for the current meta and what's around. And no surprise, we saw a lot of Shadows decks on day 1. Like that was unexpected. We had 186 decks, 146 of them contained Shadows. So
which isn't too surprising. Shadows has proven that it's a very, very strong competitive house. It revolves around stealing, which, as we know, mathematically is way more efficient than just gaining amber, because every time you're gaining 1, you're taking 1 away from your opponent, which is effectively 2 amber.
Yeah.
A 2 amber swing, excuse me.
Yeah.
So no surprise in seeing such a powerful house come out ahead on that factor.
Especially because Shadows plays so well with others, whereas other factions are kind of dependent on who they're paired up with.
Well, that's the point. The least played house was Mars. And I think we've spoken about this before, and I know when I spoke to it, Eindhoven, I said this quite a lot, is that Shadows can play well with all the other houses. Mars cares about Mars. Kind of, it plays well with some other houses, but particularly well with other Mars cards. So
yeah, which leads me to the point of, if we look at the number of Mars decks that qualified for day 2,
absolutely,
the percentage
is the most interesting thing.
So of those, when we had 46 Mars decks in day 1, and we saw that 15% of them made it through to day 2, and that's a really big percentage. I mean, the next percentage was down at 12.3, so 15.2, nearly 3% ahead of every other house. That's a really solid conversion rate. But the lowest was Sanctum, which I think you were probably a little bit surprised to see.
It's a bit surprising. Sanctum's a pretty solid house. It has its weaknesses, as every house does, but I don't see anything in particular about Sanctum that would lead it in the meta that's presented at Eindhoven to get it behind. So it's a little surprising, but we do see those Mars decks qualify so much, and I think that's probably down to that attribute that you mentioned earlier, Alex, that Mars decks plays well with Mars. So if you get a really good Mars deck, man, is it a good Mars deck. And so that'd be a great place for players to be looking through their own collection and maybe take a look at that Mars deck you've had sitting on the shelf that you haven't tried out yet.
Yeah, and when we got to the top 4, what was interesting is we only lost 2 houses. Like, there wasn't a mirror match of the top 4. We had Brobnar and Sanctum didn't make it to the top 4, but all other 5 houses were there. And more interestingly, when we got to the final, all 5 houses were still there. So we had Shadows in both decks, but one was Shadows, Mars, and Logos. One was Shadows, Untamed, and Dis. So we had 5 houses represented in the final, which I think is an interesting stat in itself. I mean, taken in isolation, that's quite interesting.
Right. I mean, especially because, like, with the Archon format showing up at this event, it made it so that it really created its own meta within itself, right? And, you mentioned that the winning deck was the Logos, Mars, and Shadows.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So why don't we go ahead and talk about that winning deck?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Rachel's deck.
If you haven't looked it up yet, the captain of Barrackslaunch, man, what a deck. I mean, it's
so cool. It's so cool.
It's got that standout stat that most people will point to in 2 Time Travelers. And that is interesting in itself, because most cards that are good, say Quixo, who is also in the deck. Quixo's a good card. 2 Quixos is better, right? They're good cards. With Time Traveler, because of the Help from Future Self interaction, 2 Time Travelers is exponentially better because there are multiple ways to get them, you have multiple ways to interact with them. And yeah, it's better better than 2 of another good card.
Can you give us an example of one of the plays that Rachel did that was a little bit unique in how that played out?
If anyone was watching the coverage from Eindhoven, I spoke to her a lot, and one of the things we spoke about was her twin bottle missioning, her own time traveler, because she knew there was a chance that she might wild wormhole or might get into another Health and Future self, so she wanted to make sure she got full value out of it. And sure enough, if you watch the footage that it was done there, she managed to pull it off.
Brilliant play, great understanding of both the game and her deck, and it's the type of play we want to see out of those top level players. And so it was great seeing that. But I don't think even just the 2 time travelers is the only trick in Rachel's deck.
No,
because she's got some insane synergies between some of the other houses in her deck.
Yeah,
the Sting and Key Abduction. For example.
So we talk about how Mars plays well with Mars, but here it's actually played well with Shadows, which again we've said plays well with all houses. But the Sting was able to just get that good bank of Amber. So when she did get the Key Abduction, it wasn't just I'm going to gain some Amber and bounce my stuff and replay them. It was a full-on, I'm going to forge a key and then replay all my stuff.
And I think it's a perfect example of one of those Mars decks that really can stand out above the other decks out there because of how synergistic some of the cards are in there. And I think, again, goes to show, check your decks, give them a try. You never know what's going to be good.
Fantastic. So, did you have any final thoughts on Eindhoven?
Well, to me, I had so much fun. More fun than I thought I'd have. And I've said this to everyone, is just being in with the community, talking to everyone there. The player base is so much fun. And we ran so many side events. We had an absolute blast. I was hoping to play more challenge games. I only think got 3 in. I was a disappointing loss 2-1-1. But I'll be at other Vault tours playing more, and hopefully I won't be running around fixing the tech, so I'll be able to spend more time actually playing the games in future.
Definitely exciting. I can't wait to get to my first Vault tour. We'll still see when that's going to be, but hopefully soon.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's talk about Seattle then. So Seattle, it was interesting because that one was a sealed event. So very different type of experience than what the players in Eindhoven saw. So what was good in the sealed event coming from Seattle?
For those who weren't there, the interesting thing about with sealed is you get given 3 decks, and then you're going to choose which. You have a bit of time, and you've got to look at those 3 decks and decide which one you want to play in the main event. So whereas with Archon, you're bringing from your whole collection, you've just got a limited view.
And it's a different way to test players' card evaluation and deck evaluation skills, especially when you're not given much time to really test with those decks.
Yeah, but then we look at the day 1 house representation, and it feels like people were looking for the same thing in those 3 decks that the people were in Eindhoven, because once again, Shadows was a top deck. It was the most played house again. And then you look at the pattern of how the houses were played, and it's very, very representative of what we saw at Eindhoven.
And I think that's really telling about there being a greater online community of people talking about KeyForge, sharing the knowledge, sharing the thoughts about what they feel is most successful, what works the best. But I think the results of the Seattle Vault Tour speak to a different story, and yeah.
Right, because one thing that I think is really interesting is while the day 1 types of decks that appeared between the 2 events were very similar, the qualification rate was very, very different between Eindhoven and Seattle.
Exactly. So while we saw a similar sort of percentage of people playing Mars, where they didn't have the choice to bring what they thought was the best Mars, they were playing the best Mars they were given. Instead of it being the highest conversion, it was actually second lowest, only to Brobnar. So suddenly the Mars that was available in that pool may not have been as synergistic as people brought when they had a choice. So while the same sort of representative on day 1, nowhere near the same as it went through, and Shadows dominated the conversion rate. These stats need to be taken in isolation. We've got a representative of decks played in day 1, but if I opened up 3 decks and they had the exact same 3 houses, well, I didn't have a choice in house. I chose the cards, but my house choice was made for me. So it's an interesting stat. We can look into it, we can discuss it, but it's a day 2 conversion. I think that means a lot more than necessarily the day 1 representation.
And even the finals for Seattle are really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the second highest conversion house, which I was expecting, I have to admit, in a sealed environment, was Untamed. Like we figured it, in a sealed environment, fast amber generation is key.
Yeah.
Yep. But the other thing about it is, if you're playing against Untamed with a deck you're sitting there going, I know my answer to this. I'm going to get to it, and then I might opt to draw more cards to get to it, or I might opt to not. But in a sealed environment, you don't know your deck so well. You don't know necessarily what your answer is yet. You could be in round 2 or 3. You've only played a couple of games with the deck, and then you're thinking, I don't know how to answer this, and you've just been overrun by Untamed before you could even get going. And so we saw Untamed in the final, and we saw Untamed win, with no shadows in the winning deck.
Yep. Logos, Sanctum, and Untamed. And what was the name of that deck?
That one was, I'm going to try and pronounce this badly again, Celerinius, the City Archbishop.
I think you did a good job.
Yeah, and that will also be linked below.
Yes.
But yeah, that, again, no shadows. It was, I think it was the last two decks with no shadows played each other in the top 4. I think it was top 4, might have been top 8. And then he went on to win the whole thing, championing the non-shadows representative in the final.
Which is great. Again, it shows that you need to be looking for those synergies in your deck. What makes your deck tick? And I think that players are going to find that to be their most successful attribute they can work on, is seeing those cards that work well and getting a understanding of what makes combos successful.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there were some key cards in this final. I mean, you look at the Untamed, and it's got the Hunting Witch, probably one of the better commons in the game, particularly in Untamed, but backed up with 2 Dust Pixies and a Dew Fairy. I mean, it's got that acceleration.
Yeah, it's got that classic Untamed suite of cards, that Amber generation. Exactly.
But key. More key card. I say key a lot. Yeah, Quixo. In both winning decks,
I can say probably the most important card in both these decks would be Quixo the Adventurer.
So Logos was the only house in both the winning decks, I believe.
Yep.
And Quixo was in both of them.
Excellent. So in preparation for getting ready for all of those, you also added a new feature that we ended up getting on the Master Vault. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So if you head on to the KeyForgeGame.com and log in, you can now look at your Amber Shard log. So with the prize walls now being up and running and people being able to redeem prizes, we now have a way for you to track it. So it'll show you where you've got Amber Shards from tournaments, where you've got it from registering decks, and also where you've redeemed them at prize walls. So it's a good way to make sure you know where.
Which is great if you're forgetful like me and just plumb forgot where you spent your Amber and don't know where these crazy pins came from.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other feature that's coming out very soon, like imminent, is our leaderboard which will show people how much Amber Shard they've earned just at Vault Tours. So people who are consistently doing well at Vault Tours will climb up this leaderboard and we'll have something special for them.
So exciting. It's been a while since we've done any sort of leaderboard, and I can't wait.
Great. So now we've gotten through our first Vault Tours and we have some extra support and play to be able to track how people are doing and what they're earning and all the prizes and all of that at the events. So let's talk about the next Vault Tours that are coming down the line. So my understanding is that this video will go live right plumb in the middle of our next Vault Tour in Chicago. Now, that is going to be at Adepticon, the 30th and 31st of this month.
Yeah, the main events. Yeah, a couple of side events the days before. And if you're there and you're watching this video and you're between rounds, come say hi, because I'll be there.
Give them a high five. Give them a high five. Say it's from Quixo.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what's really interesting about this event here at Adepticon is that this is going to be survival. That's the mode we're running.
3-deck survival. It's going to be a blast. We've not done this for Vault Tour yet. We're going to keep mixing up the variants as we can. We want to make sure all the Vault Tours feel a bit unique. And having a 3-deck survival Vault Tour is going to be awesome. Really excited for that.
So now one thing that I've noticed is that we've run Archon and we've run Sealed and we've run Survival. How exactly are you choosing which events are which formats?
It's not far off a dart at a dartboard. There are key factors that come in, and we'll talk about that with one of the upcoming ones in a minute. But we want to make sure we're including as many of the variants as possible, as many of the formats as possible, and keeping it mixed up. So if you're going to go to more than one Vault Tour, you're going to have a different experience, and that's really important to us.
Exactly, and it's a core tenet of KeyForge, and I know I talk about this all the time, but discovery is so important for this game, and so being able to go to multiple Vault Tours and have them be inherently different based on their format is part of what makes this game special. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we have Chicago happening right now, and then the next 3 are in Denver, which is April 27th through 28th, and then we have an event in Atlanta in May from the 25th to the 26th.
Yep.
And finally, from May 31st to June 2nd, we have Birmingham UK Games Expo. Now, I have it on good authority that someone we know might be there.
Yeah, I'm going to be at that one. I'm from the UK. It's a show I've been to for years, and
it's a great show.
It's a brilliant show, but really excited to be in the Vault Tour, particularly
because
I think there's something special about this Vault Tour.
It's going to be sealed, and it's going to be solo, right? So same as what Seattle was, but it's going to be Age of Ascension.
It's going to be the first Vault Tour with Age of Ascension. Yeah. I'm so excited to finally see this set in players' hands. We've been working on it for a long time, and I'm really just out of my mind excited. And to really and to put it through its paces at the Vault Tour level right away, I think it's going to call on players to use those deck evaluation skills we've been talking about, but even with, beyond that, their card evaluation skills, because for most of these players, it's going to be the first time they're going to be even seeing some of the cards in their deck.
The event's going to be big. I mean, we're just short of 200 tickets right now, and we're still way out, and we're just really starting to tell people about it being Age of Ascension. And we've got space to go as big as we need to go. Like we could make it huge if people want to come along. The show's great anyway, so you should come along and just check out the stuff.
Absolutely fabulous show. And if you can get in the Vault Tour, even better. It's going to be a phenomenal event, and again, you can't miss this one.
Yes. Unless you have anything else, any final thoughts about the Vault Tours?
I just want to go to as many as I can, and I want people to challenge me as much as possible, and maybe some ambushards if you beat me. Who knows? We'll see. I mean, since how generous I'm feeling, I guess.
But all I have to say is a big good luck to everyone in Chicago right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a good luck to everyone else that's going to be making the time to come out for a Vault Tour.
Yes, and even if you're not at the Vault Tours, we hope that everyone is having fun at their local stores, in chain-bound events, and having just a really good time enjoying the game. So, that being said, from all of us, we want to say good luck with everything that you're doing, and make sure that you subscribe, click on the bell down in the icon to be notified when we post new content, and as always, join us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So,
if we mention anything, links will be in the description. Again.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, bye, guys. Thanks for everything.
Bye, guys.